All right, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you for joining the meeting of the RTC's Bus Shelter and Bench Advisory Committee. Madam Chairwoman, staff is ready for you to begin the meeting.
Thank you, Maren. Good afternoon, everybody. Chairwoman Erin Breen for the record. I'd like to call to order the August 20th, 2020 meeting of the RTC's Bus Shelter and Bench Advisory Committee. RTC staff will begin with a roll call of community members, introduce staff on the line, and also touch on a few housekeeping items.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Mayor Dubois, Management Analyst for the RTC for the record. I will be calling your name in alphabetical order. Please confirm your attendance as I read your name. Shannon Ahart.
Present.
Thank you. Carl Anderson.
Present.
Audrey Aslin.
Present.
Aubrey Branch.
Present.
Erin Breen.
Present.
Briseta Castro. And are you on there? On there? You're on mute if you're trying to talk to us.
Yes,
There we go.
present. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Bill Redfern.
Present.
Thank you. And Rick Skipton.
I am here.
Thank you for confirming. Also, please note that we have several RTC staff on the line for today's meeting. This includes Mr. Francis Julian, the Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Carl Scarborough, Director of Transit Amenities and Technical Equipment, Mr. Dan Howland, Director of Paratransit and Specialized Services, Ms. Ellen Marcial, Manager of Transit Amenities, Mr. Zach Prudhomme, Public Affairs Administrator, and Ms. Reagan Lively, Management Analyst, will be reading our public comments. As the chairwoman mentioned, I have a few housekeeping items to go over. Please state your name for the record before speaking. Be sure to mute your line if you are not speaking, but please note that staff will monitor lines and mute any callers with background noise. Voting will be done verbally as a group, calling for ayes and nays. If there are no nays or abstentions, then the motion will carry. If there are nays, then a roll call vote will be required. In the event of a roll call vote, please wait for your name to be read to provide your vote. The chair will call for any comments or questions after an item has been presented, and you can unmute and mute yourself for that. Otherwise, that is all I have. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you, Maren. Turning to Carl Scarborough.
Thank you, Chairwoman Breen and members of the committee. Carl Scarborough, RTC Director of Transit Amenities and Technical Equipment, for the record. The first item on the agenda is to conduct your first citizens participation period. As you know, on March 22nd, 2020, the State of Nevada Executive Department issued Declaration of Emergency Directive 006, which suspended the requirement to have a physical location for public meetings. Pursuant to the directive and for the health and safety of the community, this meeting is being held telephonically. To allow for public participation, the RTC is accepting public comments via email at publiccomments@rtcsnv.com. That's public comments at rtcsnv.com. Comments can be submitted to be read aloud or to be added directly to the written record. Ms. Reagan Lively will read the public comments received by the RTC. Madam Chairwoman, back to you.
Thank you. So this is the first time set aside for public comment. This time is limited to comments on items that are included on the agenda. Comments will be limited to the first 500 words with the remaining words to be included in the written record. Do we have any comments?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. For the record, this is Reagan Lively, Management Analyst for the RTC. There are no public comments.
Thank you, Reagan. Moving on to the next item, Mr. Scarborough.
Yes, the next item on the agenda is to elect a chair and vice chair for the upcoming 2020-2021 term. The Bus Shelter and Bench Advisory Committee elects officers of chair and vice chair on an annual basis. Do we have a nomination for the position of chair and vice chair?
Shannon Aharts, for the record. I would like to nominate Aaron Breen for chair.
Are there any other nominations?
This is Bill Redfair, and I would second that nomination.
Are there any comments or questions?
Well, I would like to nominate, this is Aaron Breen, sorry. I would like to nominate Shannon Aharts. Can we do vice chair now? Did I just totally screw that up?
No, we can do them. Go ahead.
Yeah. You can do them both at the same time.
That's what I thought. So I would like to, if he's willing to serve as the vice chair again, I would like to nominate Shannon Aharts as vice chair. Turnabout's fair play.
Any other nominations for chair or vice chair? Then, if there are no comments or questions, can we have a motion to elect Aaron Breen as chair and Shannon Aharts as vice chair?
This is Bill Redfair, and I put forth such motion.
Great. So we have a motion from Bill Redfern. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Very good. The motion carries. With that, Chair Breen, I will finish conducting the meeting.
Thank you. Thank you, Carl, and thank you, committee. This is a job I enjoy, so I'm happy to continue doing it. So moving on the agenda to items number 3 and number 4, which are to approve the minutes. This is for both of the meetings held on June the 18th. If you remember, if you were with us last time, we did a quick makeup meeting for the one that we missed. And so there are meeting minutes for 2 meetings, both of which took place on June 18th, just for clarification. So has everyone had an opportunity to read the minutes? And if so, are there any additions, corrections, comments on the minutes?
This is Aubrey.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. This is Aubrey. I also move that the minutes be accepted as read with any necessary corrections.
Thank you, Aubrey. You took the words right out of my mouth to call for a motion. So we have a motion from Aubrey. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you all very much. Moving on to item number 5, which is safety measures undertaken by the RTC in response to the pandemic. And who'd have ever thought we'd still be doing this online, right? So, the first item under this part of the agenda is to receive a presentation on, oh, I just said that, sorry. It's there twice. I should read through my script first, right? So, Mr. Scarborough, I should have known. That's the only line I needed to say.
Thank you. And here to give us this presentation is Mr. Francis Julian, Deputy CEO for the RTC. And he's going to give you an overview of the safety measures. Francis?
Yes, thank you, Carl. Good afternoon, Chairwoman and board members. For the record, Francis Julian, RTC Deputy CEO. As more people are riding transit, the RTC is still working to ensure passenger safety during the pandemic. I'll be presenting to you our 14-point safety plan, including new technologies to help us in our own fight with COVID-19. Next slide, please. So here's our 14 safety plan. You'll see they're color-coded. So when we look at the green icons, it's basically what we're expecting for our riders. The first one, we're expecting for them to wear face covering. We're actually providing riders with face covering if they do not have one. And secondly, we're expecting them to practice social distancing on board the vehicle. In blue is what we're doing for our riders. So we clean basically all surface inside the vehicle daily with hospital-grade disinfectant and an electrostatic dispenser, basically doing a wraparound of that hospital-grade disinfectant inside the vehicle. We are actually implementing longer vehicles and double-decker to give us more room inside the vehicle. So all the smaller vehicles are actually not being utilized right now. We're adding more vehicles. So through our data analysis, we know that certain hours on certain routes, we would actually get overcrowding. So we're actually doing a criminal sin in transit. We're actually, people could actually see two buses back to back. It's not because one is running late. It's just a question of capacity. Inside the vehicle, we actually installed some signs to block some seats to make sure riders are socially distancing. And we're heavily promoting our contactless payment through our RTC app. And in number 8, the RTC already had driver enclosures, so basically a barrier with a plexiglass to protect the driver from assaults. We actually modified the plexiglass to have that partition go all the way to the front of the vehicle to now protect them not only from assaults, but from aerosol that could be in the air. We actually have data transparency. If you go on our website or on the app, we're actually posting all the KPIs and relative information to the pandemic and what we're doing to it. And obviously, we're promoting a healthy workforce where we monitor the health of our employees and our contractors' employees and provide the necessary PPE. Now let's go in detail on what is in the purple. So these are technologies that we're working on and should be implementing in the next 6 months. The first one is the air ion cleaners. Next slide, please. So basically, what is an air ion cleaner? The cleaner basically releases ions in the air that interacts with the virus cells and basically render any viruses inactive. It actually works on microbes and on odors as well. So if ever a bus was not smelling as fresh as it could, the system will actually help this. The ion cleaner is basically just a little electric arc that is placed inside the HVAC system of or the air conditioning system of the bus, and basically just charges the ions that are in the air, making them some ions negative and some ions positive. So basically the germs and viruses will be attracted to those ions. Next slide, please. So all the new vehicles, we're actually going to start receiving some new vehicles and we'll have microbacterial shields applied to them. This is actually a technology that is sprayed on. So it's a spray, it goes on the seats, on basically all high-touch surfaces of the vehicle, and it's a transparent membrane that if ever somebody had germs or viruses on their hands and is touching that surface, the product will actually render the viruses and the germs inert. The product actually lasts for up to a year, so it's actually really nice technology. Next slide, please. Oops, the previous slide. The next one. Okay, excellent. So the previous slide, sorry, it's skipping, but it's passenger count. If we can't, okay, that's fine. So passenger count, we're actually working and are really close to getting real-time passenger count. So unfortunately, right now, we have delays when people are boarding the vehicle. So it takes us 3 to 4 days to know exactly how many people at a certain time were in the vehicle. We're actually probably in the next few weeks, we'll be able to know in real time how many passengers are in the vehicle. That information is actually going to be shared through our app and our website to riders so they can make a better educated decision on which bus they want to ride. And for us, it's actually going to allow us to be more precise and know exactly when to inject new vehicles in a service if we're seeing overcrowding. Next slide, please. Sanitary information as well. We're actually a couple of weeks away where a passenger on the app and inside the vehicle will have a timestamp of when the last time the vehicle was sanitized with the hospital-grade sanitation system. As we can see on the slide, that's the kind of futuristic dispenser that is being utilized to make sure all surfaces are touched with that product. And this concludes my presentation. I'd be more than happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions on this part of the agenda?
Yes, Rick Skipton here.
Please go ahead, Rick.
So 2 questions. The ion air filters, is that something that is permanently in the bus, or is that something that you move from bus to bus like overnight?
No, that's something that's a really good question. I should have mentioned that. It's going to be we'll have one system per vehicle, and what it does, it cleans the air 3 times a minute. So when the vehicle will be in service, the air will actually be purified from germs, viruses, and odors 3 times per minute.
Thank you. The second question is concerning trying to keep social distancing. How full do you guys allow the buses to get, or do you have the driver say, well, we're full, no more, or how does that, can people stand in the aisles? How does that work?
So what we're accepting, what we're able to track with our basically our passenger counters, the ones that are going to be live, but we still have data. So since COVID, we're allowing 1/3 of our passenger loads. So basically, each other seat will be empty and then a bit more than that, and we're not allowing for people standing. Obviously, people can stand as a total, but it's really 1/3 of a vehicle. So just maybe as an example, a 60-footer vehicle, so the articulated vehicles that we're using, we're allowing 26 passengers when we were able to have 100 passengers pre-pandemic.
So when the bus driver pulls up, if there's 26 people, then he says, I'm sorry, we're full. Is that how that works?
Yes, and that's why in the safety plan, that's why we have extra vehicles that are deployed. So on some route at certain times of day, there's actually 3 vehicles back to back to make sure that we're not leaving anybody behind, especially in the high heat that we're experiencing right now.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
This is Aubrey. I got a question.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Julian, I guess that I like everything that you guys have put into play, but I know how people are and the way some think they got a right to not wear a mask. How the drivers, I guess, dealing with that part of it, that you used the word 2 times in your statement that they are expected to wear a mask, they're expected to do a social distancing. Does that really happen? Are the drivers having some situations, or do you guys call security for somebody to remove them from the bus? Or how's that going, I guess?
Yeah, we actually do. Obviously, we're dealing with real life. So we're doing daily audits. So through our camera system, we're actually doing live looking of about 25 vehicles a day to get a snapshot of how much it is respected. When the governor mandate started, the compliance rate was about, from our observation, was about at 80%. We're now confident it's closer to 95, if not a bit more. We're rarely seeing somebody not wearing a mask. And when this is the case, we obviously do not want to put the drivers in harm's way, because those situations, especially with the mask wearing, can be quite volatile. So security officers are dispatched, and if the passenger still refuses to wear a mask, even though he was provided with one, security is expected to remove those riders from the vehicle.
information. Thank you, sir.
That's good information to know. Do we have any other questions? Great, thank you so much. We'll move on to the next agenda item, which is a briefing on the proposed transit system changes. Carl, is that
Yeah,
you?
sorry, I had to
Okay.
unmute, had to find my thing. Thank you, Carl Scarborough again for the record. The next item is to receive a briefing on the proposed transit service changes. Again, Mr. Francis Julian, Deputy CEO for the RTC, is here to provide the presentation.
Good. Well, Francis Julian for the record again. So I'll be doing a short presentation on the RTC's budget with COVID and the proposed transit changes that we're expecting to see this fall. Obviously, all of my previous presentation, as you probably imagine, there's a lot of added costs running vehicles a third full, and on top of it, adding vehicles that we did not used to have on the road. So next slide, please. Oh, sorry, next slide. So even prior to the pandemic, it's really important to note that the RTC was facing a financial imbalance. So we actually were forecasting to lose $6 million in FY 2020. So our fiscal year just ended last June. And our forecast for this fiscal year, which we just started, was forecasted to be a $20 million loss. Obviously, COVID hit us in March. We ended up our year losing $24 million, and our forecast was to lose $102 million. Next click, please. We actually proceeded to internal cuts and made rash and really rapid decisions where we were able to actually save $40 million in our operating expenses. It's still a gaping hole of $63 million that we're facing for FY 2021. Next slide. So what did we do to address the declining revenue? So we actually stopped a lot of our capital projects. We suspended a lot of our contracts. There's currently a hiring freeze at the RTC. Management pay was cut to up to 5%. We just finished negotiating our collective bargaining agreement, and all our employees are taking pay cuts. Unfortunately, we had to lay off or furlough nearly 15% of our workforce. And today I'm actually going to propose significant reduction in our transit services. Next slide, please. Just to give you an overview, I talked about last fiscal year and this fiscal year, but just to go quickly, looking at what the RTC is facing as a challenge. It's obvious that we need new funding sources to maintain the current transit system that we have. It's important to note that our transit system is not covering all the residents of our valley. There's really pockets where there's deep need. I'm thinking of the Southwest, Centennial Hill, West Henderson are not serviced at all by our transit system, and there's definitely need from incomes that we're seeing from those regions and the mobility needs that they have. There was one silver lining that we had. The CARES Act really helped us. If I can get a next click. We actually received a total of $112 million from the CARES Act money that we're actually going to use to buy us some time to find a fiscal solution. So it actually covered our 2020 fiscal year. Next slide. It will cover our 2021 fiscal year. Remember that fiscal year used to be $100 million. So we would have, with that CARES Act money, we would have seen a deficit without those cuts. And in 2022, it will actually cover half our deficit, if I could get a click, please. So once again, the importance to to start talking about new funding source. We're one of the only transit agencies where we only have two sources of funding. We're getting funding from the sales tax. It's actually 1/8 of 1% of the sales tax, so a really small portion, and the rest are coming from our fare box revenues. When we looked at other transit agencies in the U.S., their portion of the sales tax is usually much higher, and on top of it, they're getting property tax, they're getting fuel tax, and they're getting transportation network companies like Uber and Lyft taxes as well. Next slide, please. So coming back to, unfortunately, what we have to do right now. So the main goal, we knew and we know we need to reduce our costs and decrease some of the services. The last thing we wanted to do is to contract the service area and make it smaller. So the way we proceeded was to basically take, I hate to use that word, but our nice to have, where we had duplicate service or routes that were overcrossing, or routes that did not fit in our grid patterns. So there's basically 3 buckets. There's routes that we're proposing complete elimination. I'll go in detail a bit later. There's routes where we're adjusting the service, and there's routes where we're proposing to change the frequency of service. Next slide, please. So obviously we don't work in a vacuum. So we started community engagement on June 29th, and it will actually end next week on August 28th. So far we have over 4,000. Even during the pandemic, we were able to get 4,000 surveys and comments on each of those routes, and we're actually data rich now on what kind of comment and impacts. And there's actually there will be modifications to some of the changes that we've proposed after reviewing those comments. Next slide, please. So for the outreach, what was the goal and the objective? First of all, it was to educate our riders and the community on what those changes would be, to listen to the community and learn. And as I mentioned, we actually will modify some of those changes and do minor modification to be less, for those changes to be less impactful to our community. Next slide, please. So how did we approach the outreach? So we started with elected official so giving them briefing and outreach. We did a lot of community engagement, public relation, and marketing through social media, and actually mailers where those routes were affected. Next slide. And I just talked about that. So when I say targeted marketing, so if we take a route, we basically send mailers about the changes to that particular route for about half a mile around the periphery of that route. And obviously inside our vehicle, we had all the information related to those changes. Next slide, please. So let's do a deep dive in what are those changes. So next slide. So the Valley View Arville route. So basically we call this the Valley View route. The only reason it was going on Arville, and this is a change we would have made irregardless of the pandemic. The only reason it was going on Arville is that there was no connectivity because there was no bridge at Harmon. The bridge was actually just open last week. So in fall, we'll actually just have a natural alignment and keep that bus line on Valley View. Next slide, please. The Maryland Parkway and Horizon Ridge, so that's a route in Henderson. That was our least productive route in the system. It's important to know that in the U.S., the RTC is the most productive transit agency. So we're actually carrying the most passenger per hour, and we have strict guidelines. This was our least productive route. It was running each 30 minutes, and we're proposing now to put it at 60 minutes. Putting it at 60 minutes will actually put that route right back in our standards for an hourly route. Next slide, please. The Alta and Stewart route, we're proposing to discontinue that route. The reasoning is all our transit system is made of grid of 1 mile major routes, and that route is actually half a mile from the Charleston route and half a mile from the Bonanza route. So basically, our riders would have the same distance to walk to get access to a transit line than any other transit rider throughout the valley. What we would do, if you look at the dark blue line, we would actually put a service called a Silver Star service that would run a couple of days a week to make sure that we give access to apartment complex and bridge them to doctor's appointment, to pharmacies and grocery stores. Next slide, please. 209 is actually exactly the same story as the previous route. It's bordered by the Lake Mead route and the Washington, and we would be asking of our transit riders to have the same walking distance as they do on any other routes throughout our system. We would also have a Silver Star service 3 to 4 days a week on that route. Next slide, please. The Sahara Express. So Sahara Express was actually branched at on the east side by two services. We used to call them the SXA and the SXB. The SXB was actually going on Nellis, which is a route that is actually serviced each 15 minutes by a vehicle. So it was really a duplication of service. It was, once again, what I call nice to have. And we're proposing to discontinue that branch of the Sahara Express. Obviously giving all those riders opportunities to make a transfer and to use the Nellis bus to go to their current destination. Next slide, please. The WAX, so the West Cliff Airport Express and the Centennial Express, basically what we're proposing is bunching those two routes. So these were actually not our best producing routes. And what we're doing is basically taking the highest ridership bus stops and of both routes and making one, what we believe that will be one very successful bus route. So essentially the new route would go, would start at Centennial Terminal, would go directly to the Bonneville Transit Center in downtown without stopping, right on the highway on the HOV lane. From there, go back on the highway on the HOV lane. Next stop would be UNLV, and the final stop would be both terminals at McCarran. Next slide, please. The Henderson Downtown Express, that's the route for Boulder City. We're proposing to stop that route on Water Street and give the options to rider to take a really frequent route, which is the Boulder Highway Express that runs each 15 minutes as well. So that would actually increase their total journey by 15 minutes, but still give them connectivity through the downtown. This was an hourly route. It will now run, because it's smaller, it will run each 50 minutes. So it's a small improvement, but it's important to know that the number of riders on that route was very, very low. So there's not that many people that are affected by it. Next slide, please. The Strip and Downtown Express and the Deuce. So we are proposing to keep the Deuce and to terminate the Strip and Downtown Express. The Deuce would now actually run 24 hours all the way to our South Strip terminal and end up where it usually does on Fremont Street, basically covering 97% of the stops that the SDX was covering. The only portion that is not covered is the convention center. We believe that with the new Boring Company's tunnel, this will be serviced, and hopefully when we get big conventions again, the RTC is always supplying extra service to help out with capacity at the convention center. In green on the map is basically the coverage for the downtown area, the Las Vegas Premium Outlet. We would actually put a small circulator in place to make that connection to the Deuce. So anybody that would want to go shopping that are staying on the Strip could actually take the Deuce and then take that really frequent shuttle to go to the outlet mall and allow tourists from the that are living downtown to just take that shuttle to go to the outlet mall. Next slide, please. So what happens for paratransit? So that's one of the good news. We're only reducing the service area. That was really important for us, only by 0.27 miles. And we're affecting 9 certified paratransit customers. They will be grandfathered. And obviously what we did as an outreach, because there was only 9, we made sure to personally call them and explain them the change. One thing that's important out of the 9 customers that we had, only 1 trip was taken in the last year. Next slide, please. So what did we do? Obviously with COVID, it was harder. So we were more present on social media and we had to do traditional marketing, but we still did some YouTube live presentation on July 28th. We're obviously doing a presentation today. We did presentation at various committees and we actually did in-person outreach at the Bonneville Transit Center 2 weeks ago, 1 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon. Next slide. So the public comment, as I mentioned, was from June 29 to August 28. We will be seeking board approval on September 10th, and the service change could be as soon as October 4th. And this concludes my long presentation. Sorry for that. And I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Francis. You know, this is sobering circumstances, and I commend RTC and all of the staff for the obvious very hard work that went into making these decisions. For everyone on the committee, if you have not commented and would like to, you have another 8 days to let your voice be heard. You know, I think that the solutions that you all came up with are heartening to know that you've really considered every person that was depending on you. So, so thank you for all of those efforts. Does anyone have questions for Francis? No?
Well, let me, sorry, I didn't want to jump on anybody else. So I have a number of questions, Francis. So back on your slide, you've got a slide that's got 7 boxes that say that you're addressing the internal declining revenues. And one of those boxes is to reduce the transit service. The other 6 boxes, are those the things you've already done that brought us down the $40 million in internal cuts?
Exactly.
Okay.
So those were all done. The first measures were actually done days following the government shutdown.
Okay. So the eliminated and postponed capital project, you know, we're presented each meeting with several items that are capital projects, Ballard projects, the Maryland Parkway, our revamp, the Boulder Highway, et cetera. Can you enumerate to us in some fashion, or maybe it's next time, what things, you know, what we should expect? Like we are left with expectations from our previous meetings that things are happening in a certain timeline. We're refurbishing, you know, the bus stops, et cetera. Well, what things have stopped and what things are postponed, what things are continuing on?
Yeah, very good question. So we did not want to affect those kinds of projects. So one big example, $16 million example, we have transit is actually relying on really complex software, pieces of software that are really expensive. So our software is 16 years old, so we're kind of way behind the 8-ball. But obviously for us, that was an easy capital project not to pursue. So that was multi-million dollars just there. The other one, because some of our fleet are not running as much, we actually pushed the purchasing of new buses in time, because we'll be able to keep, usually we keep our fixed route vehicles up to 500,000 miles. Because the smaller vehicle, as I mentioned in my previous presentation, are not on the road right now, we were able to push the procurement of those vehicles to a later date as well. And Paratransit is exactly the same. We're seeing 50% of our ridership in Paratransit, so we actually just canceled a procurement to buy new buses just because right now we have an overcapacity. So
I guess that didn't exactly answer my question. So like the Bollards project, is that canceled at this point?
No, the Ballard project is not canceled. I want to say, and Carl helped me, I know it's postponed. It was obviously supposed to start in the pandemic, but that one is just postponed. It's not going to be canceled. Maryland Parkway is actually running full steam ahead, and we're still working on the Boulder Highway project as well.
And Francis, if I can, so the Bollard project, we're delaying it a little bit. We're trying to get some discretionary federal grant funding for the pilot that would help us cover the costs instead of using traditional grant funding. So we're just trying to look for ways to be creative and use federal funds to continue those projects. We're wrapping up the design of the Bollard project, and then we'll be going out for construction.
Okay. Thank you. So my next question was, you mentioned two sources of revenue. But you didn't mention ad revenue. Don't you guys get some sort of ad revenue?
We do. I did forego or did not mention it in the overall revenues that the agency is getting. I mean, it's not even something to rely on. It's such a small portion of our total revenue and our total.
It's a rounding error. Okay. And then finally, you know, you went through all of these, and it was a nice presentation. What I didn't get was, if we do these changes, what is the impact? You know, I don't see any numbers at the end that say, okay, well, make these changes, and all of a sudden we're in balance, we're a plus. How does, you know, what does that mean?
Unfortunately, we're not at plus. Those changes equate to about $10 million a year. So it obviously helps the situation. And that's why I was saying eventually we will need to get new funding sources, because you saw some of the slides. We have, in 4 years, we'll be facing $60 million. With those changes, that $60 million is going to be $50 million, but we'll be talking about drastic changes, 5 times the magnitude of what I just talked, if we don't get new funding sources.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have questions?
Madam Chair, I think maybe you could this one up just to not extend this conversation much longer. But I think Rick asked a very good question. I think for me, maybe I'm missing it or something here. Is there any way possible, being with all that RTC is going through this year with COVID, can we get a list of the projects that will be finished this year in 2020? Because maybe I think that could help me. Because the question he asked, I just want to know what all will be finished during this year.
Yeah. We can ask our capital projects team to come to the next meeting and give us a status report.
Status report, and you know what? We probably could do it in reverse, because we at the RTC, as you all know, we always have so many projects on the table. It's going to be easier to tell you the ones that we're not pursuing for now. They're much lesser than the one we're pursuing. So I just want to reassure everybody on the call that there's actually more projects going forward than some that will not be going forward.
Well, and I'd like to also add that a lot of the times when you're looking at RTC projects, that there are other budgets besides RTC involved. So there's, each of the cities are involved in some of those projects as well. So there's lots of players for different projects. But I also like to point out, if you were out at all at the very beginning, you saw that everybody made pretty good use of the time when there was less traffic on the streets. So I think overall, this is a terrible thing that's happened to everyone. And the other thing is that no one knows how long it's going to last, or God forbid if it's going to get worse. So
Yeah.
It's very difficult to plan in this kind of a situation. So that's why I personally think that your efforts on the transit end, which was what we're here really to discuss is transit issues. The fact that you've been able to take all of the transit users into account when you're making sure that your changes aren't affecting them, or as few of them as possible. And plus the fact, I'm really heartened to hear that because of the 4,000 people that have responded, that some adjustments were made. So I don't know how many times you ever participate in something and you get to find out that that something changed because of input. So again, if you have not done that survey yourself, and especially if you're a transit user, please take the time to go to the website and participate and let your voices be heard. So do we have any other comments or questions on this topic?
This is Carl Anderson. I have a question. And I'm sorry if this was covered previously. How much implementing some of the COVID-related policies and procedures, how much did that affect your budgeting?
It's in a major way. Our operating expense, we're roughly talking about an extra $10 million a month to operate both paratransit and transit.
Wow.
Thank you.
But it's also what allows people to feel comfortable getting on a bus.
Exactly. It's part of our plan. That's why we've built we surveyed our customers on the vehicle to making sure that we understood what made them feel safer. And that's why we put out our 14 plan, safety plan in place, really to address that, to give back confidence in our transit system back to the community.
Right.
And that's probably our most important mission right now.
Well, and I don't know about anybody else, but I know the first couple of times that I saw a bus that had what looked to be, not very many people on it, but the front of the bus said that the bus was full. It didn't even occur to me, of course, that that's why, but that, and, so once that occurred to me, it's like, oh, it's because of social distancing. So I think that getting the word out is probably the most important. So if you know transit users, please discuss what you learned today about all the steps that RTC has taken. So do we have any other questions or comments for Francis before my dogs go absolutely nuts? I'm going to try to turn this over. And say thank you very much, Francis. And Carl, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Okay, very good. So on this appropriately warm day, we are now going to have a presentation on the RTC's current summer heat community outreach efforts. And here to discuss this with us is Mr. Zach Prudhomme from the RTC's Government Affairs team.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. For the record, again, my name is Zach Prudhomme. I'm the Public Affairs Administrator with the RTC, and today I will be giving a presentation on this year's summer heat campaign. Next slide, please. So this summer, as we've all discussed, is unlike any in years past. Transit riders were faced with the extreme heat as well as the threat of the pandemic. So for this year's summer heat campaign, we considered both issues and we adjusted the campaign accordingly. We still made sure that transit riders were informed of the dangers of the heat, but we were also, we were still able to distribute water to the transit riders. But this year we leaned heavily on community partners to provide other ways to stay cool, while also factoring in COVID-19 safety precautions. This is also a way for the RTC to help promote some of those local businesses who may be struggling during this difficult time. Next slide, please. This year, campaign partners donated hand sanitizer and face coverings, as well as water, sunscreen, chapstick, and other items. The items were distributed at a limited amount of outreach events, as seen here in the photo. We did have the forethought that the outreach events would likely be scaled back due to the threat of the pandemic, so we planned an entirely different approach to the campaign this year. For the first time, the Summer Heat campaign involved coordinated efforts with local businesses. So transit riders could simply go to each business, show their transit pass, and receive discounts on items to help them stay cool. Things such as a free scoop of ice cream or a free iced tea, even discounts off of the high roller wheel so that they could escape the heat that way. All of those and more were arranged to help them just stay cool during the hottest months of the year. We made sure that customers were aware of all of these exclusive deals by communicating with them through email, text message, signs on buses, and more, in addition to also letting the local media know so that they could help spread the word about this also. Next slide, please. In all, we partnered with almost a dozen local businesses for the campaign. Logos you can see on your screen right now. The RTC had previously worked with some of these partners, but this year's campaign efforts allowed the RTC to build new relationships. One example is Pkwy Burger, whose owner not only offers a very generous discount to transit riders and even drivers, but he also relies solely on our transit system himself as his means for transportation. And we actually have a short video from our blog story that tells his story. We can roll the video now, please.
Hey, what's up, guys? I'm Colin Fukunaga of Pkwy Burger.
Looks like we're having a little bit of technical difficulties there. We are trying to restart that. Hey, look, it's kind of a live. Here we are. We're trying to do it as we can in this new world.
Blame it on the heat.
Yes, blame it on the heat.
That's right.
Let's try it again. All right, well, it looks like we're having some issues with it, which is unfortunate because it's actually a really good video. The owner of Pkwy Burger is extremely passionate. He's very excited not only to be a partner with us, but to help promote something that helps him each and every single day. He's been on our transit system for years, and he doesn't understand why more people don't use it. He's such a huge advocate of it. So this campaign allowed us to connect with him and bring him on as a new partner for the year. So we're really excited about that. And while we can't show the video right now, and that's unfortunate, however, this is still part of the RTC blog, which has tons of other stories as well, including this one. So I think we're going to try one more time for the video. Now, looks like we're still having some issues, but I tell you what, if you go to the RTC's blog, you can watch this story as well as several other stories that we've done with many of our partners. They're all really good. It's good to get their perspective, and we're very, very happy to work with them. So the campaign itself will run through the end of the month. All of the businesses will be accepting the discounts until then, and that is pretty much the end of my presentation. I will take any questions anyone may have.
Thank you, Zach. Well, hey, my first question is, are there multiple locations of Fuku Burger? It looks like from this video, yeah, that there are.
Yeah, there's one in one near Chinatown, and there's one farther south in the valley. Both locations accept the discount.
That's wonderful. But that's terrific partners. So does anyone have, and talk about the perfect timing for this, in this crazy week on top of this crazy year? Anyone else have questions for Zach? Well, then my job is to turn it back over to Carl Scarborough.
Thank you. Carl Scarborough for the record. Mr. Dan Hallen, Director of Paratransit and Specialized Services, is here to present on the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Mr. Hallen, take it away.
Thank you, Carl, and Madam Chair, committee members, good afternoon. For the record, my name is Dan Howland. I'm the Director of Paratransit and Specialized Services for the RTC. Today, I'd like to give a look at our commemoration of the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, or the ADA, as it's well known. As many of you know, we recently reached a milestone in the disabled community. Sunday, July 26, marked the ADA's 30th anniversary. We joined others across the nation in celebrating 3 decades of progress. This important civil rights law has leveled the playing field in ensuring equal access to transportation and other important facets of life for persons with disabilities. We're proud of the role we've played and continue to play here at the RTC in providing equitable service to our customers. And we are going to roll the dice here in a moment to commemorate this occasion, to see if this video highlighting a handful of individuals and partners who have advocated for equal opportunity and access and in effect contributed to building our community. And here is the video. Well, we seem to have some audio problems, but what I'll do is I'll just talk over it as the video plays. And the lady you just saw there was Sue Joseph. And Sue Joseph, I worked with her for a couple of years before she retired, and she was known as the queen of paratransit because she was here for so many years and incorporated and made so many changes to benefit the folks that use our services in the disabled community. And it's, as Zach was saying earlier about the video that you weren't able to see for the hydration program, this video is also available for you to see on our website and blog. And I can tell you it's a great video. We have many folks on it besides Sue, our chairwoman from our TAC committee, Transit Access Advisory Committee. Jean Payton is on there. Jean's been riding paratransit since the mid-90s here in Las Vegas. And she talks about how the paratransit service creates and provides the independence and flexibility that many in our community who are disabled would not have without paratransit. Also on that video, I believe, is the president of Blind Connect and Angela's House, and we have a partnership with Angela's House at the MTC, Raquel O'Neill. Raquel is blind, and she talks about paratransit and what paratransit has meant to her and her family in being able to use it and get where they need to go here in this valley. So please do check out the video on the blog, as Zach Prudhomme was saying earlier. And, you know, I'm just to be a part of RTC in this organization and to be part of the community that is providing services to the disabled community is a pleasure. And the fact that we've just celebrated 30 years of the ADA, and there's more changes to come that will benefit the disabled community, I'm sure. And we're just very proud here at the RTC to be part of that. So That concludes my presentation and prepared remarks. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Thank you, Dan. Does anyone have questions for Dan? But you're just afraid because of the echo now. We're just having some gremlins, kids. Dan, thank you. And
well, what do you know?
The Americans with Disabilities Act required that any public transportation system.
Well, just a teaser for you. So please go to the blog and check it out.
And also provide paratransit. So we began immediately working on a paratransit service, and I was able to start that service up. I'm very proud to have been a part of that at the foundation.
I've been associated with the RTC of Southern Nevada since 1995 in various capacities and commissions and committees that I've served on during that period of time. I've seen the evolution of the excellence that is exhibited by the RTC from 1995 to the present time. It is at a certain level of exemplary performance that very few people realize exists.
Jean has been a paratransit user since 1994, though I came in as part of the implementation part. However, for people that were disabled before that, I think it made a tremendous difference in what went on with their lives. In many instances, paratransit just really saved my life.
Public transportation is the foundation. It's the cornerstone of what the disability rights movement really began upon. If you cannot access public transportation, how can you access life?
Paratransit takes me up in the morning and takes me to work, and it picks me up in the afternoon and takes me home, which I really appreciate. I do have a few favorite drivers, yes. Thank you for taking me to work and back home.
Access to public transportation for people with disabilities is a lot more crucial than I could have ever imagined. Once I started working in the service, I think I took for granted being able to leave and go whenever I want. And what it means to me is that I get to contribute to the community on a level and a platform with an organization that I really never imagined being a part of. It's a service that's much greater than myself.
My experience working at the RTC has been great. Since I've started with RTC, doors have been loosened to make it easier for me to open them. Applicable space has been created so that my wheelchair can fit in conference rooms in any other room.
I am a military service disabled veteran. To be able to have full access to public transportation, including the RTC, is very, very important to me. The RTC has helped me to be able to access this community that is Southern Nevada much more easily and affordably.
So the services that are offered here at the Mobility Training Center are three-tiered. So the first service that we provide here is ADA paratransit service. The second thing that we offer here at the Mobility Training Center is RTC mobility training. So that's teaching a person with a disability or a senior citizen how to use the fixed route transit system or regular city bus. The third thing that we offer here is the only blindness skills training center in the state of Nevada, and that's run by a partner of the RTC's called Blind Connect.
You know, Blind Connect Angela's House has always had a mission to help restore independence for people who have been affected by vision loss. When we got the opportunity to partner with RTC to have our facility, Angela's House, actually built within the Mobility Training Center, that was an amazing development for our community, for our organization. And, you know, it's really created a place where people who just have lost their eyesight, that they can come and feel safe to learn this new way of life, to learn and find out that there's hope after vision loss.
As a classroom teacher, I previously taught students with very severe disabilities who were often, for a choice of not better words, left in the classroom. By working with the Regional Transportation Commission, we were able to get city bus passes, which allowed me to take my students on community-based instruction where I could teach them appropriate behaviors in public, such as restaurants, grocery stores, and other places in the community. They also provide a training at the site where they have a bus inside of their mobile transportation area that they can show them exactly how to use their passes, you know, where do you guys sit when you get up for someone who's in a wheelchair. It has opened up a whole new world to many of our students who have not been able to access some of those areas.
Transportation is a key need for our folks. And so having the ability to move around, that independence, is really a quality of life issue for anybody with a disability. So we're very grateful to everybody at the RTC for all they've done to help.
Well, Madam Chair, I told you it would work. What a great video.
Dan, what an awesome video. A lot of people that I know and have worked with in that video, and 1.3 million trips a year for paratransit, and then the countless number of people, 2,300 a month or something, that take fixed route. Where would the community be without RTC? What a great video. It makes me proud to be affiliated with you guys. So now that you've seen the video, does anyone have questions for Dan? Okay, hearing none, it is once again my job to turn it over to Carl Scarborough.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Carl Scarborough again for the record. The next item is to discuss topics of interest. The Bus Shelter and Bench Advisory Committee members may share information about activities, meetings, news, and other topics of interest in an informal manner. While no action may be taken on the subjects discussed, this item provides an opportunity for the exchange of information and may serve as the forum to recommended future meeting agenda items.
Does anyone have any topics of interest that you'd like to discuss? Well, as usual, I do. So I gave you the opportunity to go first. And this is really more of an FYI. As we did last year, my program's partnered with a committee that the RTC brought together, and we are going to partner again for a big campaign for the time change for pedestrian safety, which, believe it or not, our pedestrian fatalities are actually worse at the time change, which this year happens to be November 1st. When you leave work on Friday, it's daylight, and when you come back and you leave work on Monday, by the end of the day, it's not daylight anymore. And so we see an increase in pedestrian fatalities during that time of the year. Last year, we combined on a huge campaign that was wildly successful. This year, we had to come up with a way to, how do you do a campaign when you really aren't supposed to be in a room with the rest of your team? So we're going to be doing outreach and education on the top 6 to 8 streets where pedestrians are hit in our community. We'll be looking for volunteers if anyone's interested to drop off materials. But really, I just want you to know it'll be, there's all the way into Henderson and all the way to North Las Vegas that we're highlighting. Unfortunately, everybody has areas, no matter what city you live in, that are on that high list of where pedestrians are hit. So we're going to be addressing that the last week of October and into the first week of November. So I'll try to update you August. Yeah. So at the next meeting, I'll be able to give you the final, the locations and how it's going. But if you're bored and you want to volunteer for a project, we could use your help. So no one has anything else. we're going to move on to the next item, which again goes back to Carl, I believe. Yes.
Thank you again, Carl Scarborough, for the record. This is the final citizens participation and the last item on the agenda. We can go forward.
Great. So this is the second time set aside for public comment. Just a reminder that comments need to be limited to the first 500 words. If you had remaining comments, they would need to be submitted to be included with a written record. Reagan, do we have anyone that would like to address the committee?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Again, Reagan Lively, Management Analyst for the RTC. For the record, due to audio issues, we did have member Bricinda Castro submit a public comment. Bricinda, I wanted to ask if you wanted to speak on behalf of your comment or like me to read what you had submitted. She may still be having some audio issues, so I'm going to read the comment that she had submitted.
Okay.
Again, this is from member Bricinda Castro. Good afternoon, all. Thank you for a great and informational meeting. I was having issues with my audio, but I wanted to add comments on agenda item number 5. I would love to see a collaboration with the Está en tus manos campaign to further safety measures and efforts of target Spanish-speaking communities. Possible shelter ads of the campaign would be nice to see. Thank you. And that concludes the public comments.
That's a great point to make. And Carl,
we will reach out to her and connect her with the right people. Yeah, I think that could be a very valuable partnership.
Right, and I would very much like to do that too for this. You know, looking at trauma data for a couple of months during the lockdown within the Hispanic Latino community, the numbers were much higher than any other numbers. So I think that it's a very timely comment that we should all be taking notice of. So I'd be happy to be part of that as well, Carl.
Great.
Great. So if we don't have any other public comments, I would just like to thank all of you for your time today. Remind you that our next meeting, which will hopefully